Hello, welcome back to the You at Your Best podcast. I'm your host, Morgan. For this week's episode, I want to talk about being a highly sensitive person, what that feels like, and how to thrive living as a highly sensitive person. This episode is directed specifically for highly sensitive people, but if you're a human being, this episode will be useful. Even if you don't relate to some of the things that I say, try to stay with me until the end, or even skip to the end. If you're on Spotify, it has like little chapters, so you can find the spot where I start talking about how to take care of yourself. So just keep that in mind as you're listening to this. Even if you don't relate to everything I say, I think this episode will be helpful for literally anyone, honestly. First of all, being a highly sensitive person is not a diagnosis of any kind. It's a personality trait. It's just simply who a person is. People who are highly sensitive are more likely to be neurodivergent. People who are neurodivergent are more likely to be a highly sensitive person, but it doesn't mean that it's the same thing. You can be a highly sensitive person and not be neurodivergent, not have any diagnoses of any kind, because being a highly sensitive person is just who you are. It's just what you were born with, the personality that you naturally have. Being a highly sensitive person means you are someone who has high sensitivities to the world around you. So your own emotions, your physical environment, and certain stimuli. A highly sensitive person is more likely to have heightened needs for personal space, need more alone time and self-care, and to be overwhelmed by things like loud noises, bright lights, strong emotions. I've realized that I am a highly sensitive person, that I don't experience life the same way that most people do. And for a long time, my sensitivity felt like something that I had to manage, minimize, or apologize for. But the more I've gotten to know myself, the more I have realized that my sensitivity is just simply information, depth, and attunement, but not weakness, not something that I need to hide. I spent a lot of my life believing that I was weak, that being and accepting who I am meant that I am proving to other people who saw me as weak that they were right. This episode is meant to challenge those beliefs and to show people who have similar characteristics that you are important, you do matter, and you are not overreacting, you are not too emotional, you are not weak, you are just you. You're just who you've always been, and you can't change it even if you want to. So if you've ever felt like you're too much, then this episode is for you. So I want to start off by talking about what being a highly sensitive person feels like. And a lot of these are for me. Not every highly sensitive person will relate to all of these, but these are some things that I have experienced and what made me realize I am a highly sensitive person, and that I know a lot of highly sensitive people have talked about in their own experience as well. I have this split into 4 different categories. So we have emotional and inner world sensitivities. We have sensory and nervous system sensitivities, intense creativity and focus, and then also self-protective patterns. These, again, are things that a lot of neurodivergent people relate to, but you can be highly sensitive and not be neurodivergent and still relate to these things, even if it's not on as intense of a level. And you can also be human and relate to these. Firstly, for emotional and inner world sensitivities, highly sensitive people, we have very big emotions. So joy feels euphoric, but sadness almost kind of feels eternal, like it's not going to end. It's really deep. We feel things deeply even when nothing big is happening, so we can tend to overreact to small inconveniences but maybe underreact to problems that seem like they're bigger from an outside perspective. I remember one time whenever I was in high school, my mom and one of my friends were in the drive-thru at McDonald's after homecoming, I think. And at McDonald's, they gave me chicken fingers or something like that, or chicken strips instead of chicken nuggets. And I got so angry, just so overwhelmed. And I remember my friend and my mom were like, "You're being kind of a brat right now." And I was like, "I know I am, but I can't help it because it's just so overwhelming. It really negatively impacts you." And I'm like that. If I order food, I genuinely feel so disappointed, so upset if I don't get the food that I need. And I've gotten to a place that now that I'm older, that I am better at managing those emotions and better at not expressing them or being outwardly angry, but I still feel the anger. And I would never be unkind to a worker of any kind over something like that. And then for me, like if something really bad were to happen, like I don't know, my house burnt down or something, like I wouldn't react as heavily as I would to getting the wrong food, which makes no sense whenever someone isn't a highly sensitive person, but it's kind of like that for me. Highly sensitive people, we have very intense inner worlds that never really turn off, which can be really overwhelming at times. I'm like this with my podcast. I always have something that's going on in my head and some kind of thoughts that are coming up, and I'm always constantly throughout the day, throughout my life, thinking about literally anything that has to do with my special interest or things that I love. And while that's amazing, it can be really overwhelming at times because there are times where I can't shut my brain off because I just care so deeply and I love the stuff that I care about. We usually have to connect with ourselves first before we're able to outwardly connect. So like an example I have is in my relationship, I have to connect with myself first before I'm able to do anything with him, with Hunter, whether that's sexually, emotionally, anything like that, physically, spending time together, anything like that. I have to connect with me first or I don't feel connected to him. We have this natural hyper awareness of tone shifts, energy, silence, facial expressions. We notice all of those things that the average person doesn't notice as much. And a lot of this comes from trauma, but a lot of it also comes from just who we are. We have intense morals and values. Things feel right or wrong in our bodies. We have very strong emotional reactions to injustice, cruelty, or harm in any way. Next, I have sensory and nervous system sensitivities. A lot of us get very easily overstimulated from noise, crowds, screens, or just constant input of any kind. Loud environments can drain us really fast. And for me, this is something that has appeared as social anxiety or panic attacks. So for a long time, I thought that I just had really severe social anxiety and panic attacks, which I do, but it doesn't always come from social anxiety. Sometimes it's just overstimulation from being in a loud environment or around a lot of people where there's a lot of light or a lot of noise or just a lot of physical things. There are a lot of visual stimuli can be really overwhelming for me. Violent or intense movies, shows, or anything like that can stick with us for a really long time. It can be really hard to just move on from them. We have sensory processing sensitivities that we can't push to the side with logic. It's just always there. And then we have an exaggerated need for downtime, quiet time, and recovery time. And then for intense creativity and focus, we have hypercreativity. So ideas, images, and words are constantly moving in our brains. For me, it's not images as much because I have more of a word brain. But highly sensitive people, our brains are always going and going. We have intense interests and hyperfixations that feel nourishing but can easily become consuming. For a lot of highly sensitive people, creating isn't optional. It isn't something that's just fun. It's something that's regulating. It's a way that we express ourselves, the way that we process things. And then we have self-protective patterns. So sometimes we can have avoidant behaviors because the world feels too loud and too demanding. We can pull back from people or situations, not because we don't care, but because we feel everything. Childhood experiences and traumas can amplify our sensitivities. Trauma doesn't create sensitivity because it was always there. Our sensitivity was always something that we had, but it can shape how safe it feels to express ourselves authentically. So a naturally sensitive person is something that we are born with, at least in my experience, but our environment can play a role in it as well, if that makes sense. All of these sensitivities are incredibly difficult to manage, and it takes a lot of self-care, self-understanding, and constant self-monitoring just to emotionally survive the modern world. But despite all of that, being a highly sensitive person is such a blessing. Being hypersensitive isn't the same thing as being fragile. We just experience more depth in our everyday lives. We don't just live normal lives, we enter our lives fully, emotionally, physically, spiritually. So if you're a highly sensitive person, the problem was never you. The problem was you being forced to live like someone that you're not. Sensitivity didn't break you. Life just wasn't designed with your brain in mind. A lot of highly sensitive people, we find ourselves feeling like there's something wrong with us, or the people around us think we're weird, or they can just tell that there's something off about us. And a lot of neurodivergent people feel like this too. And they can't really understand it, but they're like, this person's weird, this person makes me uncomfortable. But the reason why we make people feel that way isn't because there was ever anything wrong with us. It's because those people aren't able to meet us in our emotional depth, because that's not how their brains are. Being a highly sensitive person means that we have emotional depth that allows for meaningful connection, powerful creativity, and intuition and inner knowing, which means that people who don't have that can feel really intimidated whenever they're around us. And a lot of the time that intimidation comes off as disgust or annoyance, because whenever you're a highly sensitive person, a lot of the time people can sense your depth. A lot of the time people can sense that you are destined for greatness. And I'm not saying this as like I'm better than people, highly sensitive people are better. I'm just saying the truth. A lot of people can really sense that. And if they don't understand themselves well enough, they'll take it out on us. They'll make us feel bad about ourselves. And I've spent so much of my life feeling like I'm weird, or there's something wrong with me, or I need to hide myself, or I'm weak, or I'm bad. But I was never any of those things. And neither are you. Being a highly sensitive person and truly accepting yourself for who you are, that's incredible. That's how you live the most fulfilling life that you can. Please try not to let the noise of other people dictate who you are or how you feel about yourself. Just accept yourself for exactly who you are. And even if you're not a highly sensitive person, accept that. Accept yourself for the exact person that you are, the things that you cannot change. Accept them and focus on your strengths. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about how to thrive in this modern world as a highly sensitive person. Self-understanding is a non-negotiable. We can't skip self-understanding. So we have to learn about our inner world instead of fighting against it. We have to name patterns without judging ourselves. We have to understand that intensity needs context, not suppression. You don't need to make yourself smaller. You just need to understand yourself. You have to make space for yourself and your interests. Me being a parent, this is especially important. Parenthood is so demanding, which means that it's really easy to lose yourself. For a highly sensitive person, losing yourself isn't just sad, it's about survival almost. We have to express ourselves to be able to function in this life. And I'm not being dramatic. That is 100% true. We have to express ourselves. Self-expression is a need if you are a highly sensitive person, not just an added bonus to your life. We almost can't survive without it. And when you are surviving life without it, you become so miserable. Let your hyperfixations be nourishing, not just something that you outgrow eventually. Let it be something that is who you are. Creating is a form of emotional digestion for us. It's how we process things. So you need to let go of the guilt around this, because you need to create to feel okay. Especially as a parent, I feel like parents, we feel so guilty whenever we do anything for ourselves, or if we're caretakers of any kind, or if you have other responsibilities in your life. It can feel so bad and genuinely make you feel guilty whenever you do things that you love, because it doesn't feel productive. But I promise you, it is productive to do things that you love. It is productive to rest. It is productive to allow yourself to have a fulfilling and nourishing life, because you need it. Human beings need it, but especially highly sensitive people. The next one is downtime is mandatory, not a reward. We have to rest so that we can function in our everyday life. So give yourself quiet time, schedule downtime, find activities that are low stimulating but regulating. Have tiny rituals that soothe your nervous system, like soft lighting, sitting in silence, sitting in the dark, rocking back and forth, having comfort shows or comfort books, gentle movement like yoga, or less gentle movement like weightlifting if your body needs more stimulation, foods that are regulating, journal or brain dump as much as you need to. Be mindful and present whenever you can. Limit sensory input when you can, so less doom scrolling, for example. The next one is to set boundaries. So saying no before you hit burnout, not forcing yourself through things just because others can do it, releasing self-pressure to keep up, allowing yourself to leave whenever you're uncomfortable, to rest whenever you need to pause whenever you need to. Don't let people make you feel guilty for doing what you need and taking care of yourself. And for me, if I don't take care of myself, if there are times where I have to force myself to do something past what I'm able to do, it takes me days or even weeks to recover. with setting boundaries with yourself, sometimes we can feel things so deeply, so we just want a distraction. So it's a lot easier for us to become addicted to doom scrolling and social media. But if it makes you feel overwhelmed, you have to set that boundary with yourself and tell yourself, I cannot scroll on social media. I cannot do whatever it is that is overwhelming me. And it's also important to have boundaries around your special interests, because our special interests are really important to us, but those special interests can also become overwhelming if we don't give ourselves a break. We can easily become consumed by them. You have to really pay attention to your body and think, how am I feeling right now? And sometimes you can feel overwhelmed even if you're excited and super happy. And if you just keep on working and working and working on your special interests, you will eventually crash. That's really exhausting and really difficult to come out of. I have experienced it so many times. It literally caused me to have a really intense meltdown the last time it happened. So you really have to have those boundaries with yourself. You really have to tell yourself, okay, I love you. I know that you love this, but right now you got to calm down. You got to stop. You got to take a break and do literally anything else. And then the last one that I have is to embrace your sensitivity fully. You don't need to become less sensitive to thrive. Life works better when you build your life around your brain and how your brain works and your sensitivity, rather than trying to take it away, because you can't stop it. You're sensitive and that's just who you are. Sensitivity isn't an obstacle, it's just a guide. Being a highly sensitive person is so incredible. It's literally the best thing about who I am. I love who I am, but that doesn't mean that I'm not human. It doesn't mean that me feeling things so deeply or caring so deeply about my special interests is all that I am. I'm also someone who needs rest. I'm also someone who needs a break. I'm also someone who needs to not think about my special interests for as long as I need to until I can recover. So just remember that as a highly sensitive person, you were never meant to be stronger. You were just meant to be truer in yourself. Your sensitivity is not something to fix, but something that you need to listen to. You're allowed to build a life that feels soft, meaningful, and spacious, and you don't need to live your life how other people live theirs. I actually forgot about all of these things that I wanted to add, but there's another part that I want to add to this episode, and it's early signs that a highly sensitive person is becoming dysregulated, so that you can kind of start to understand yourself a little bit better. These are all things that I experience and may not be things that you experience, but maybe you relate to some of them, or maybe they can help you understand why your brain is the way that it is. So for me, signs that I'm overwhelmed are my inner world gets loud but less clear. So my thoughts speed up, they feel messier. I feel full of feelings, but I can't understand them. I can't explain them. I want to express something, but I don't know where to start. And I start to feel really misunderstood. I start to monitor myself more than I normally do, and I already monitor myself a lot anyways, but I'm constantly asking myself, like, am I okay? I'm constantly scanning my emotions instead of feeling them and inhabiting them. I feel responsible for managing myself perfectly. For me, whenever I'm overwhelmed, self-awareness turns into self-surveillance, and regulation just goes out the window. Rest starts to feel earned instead of needed. I feel guilty for stopping. I tell myself that I'll rest after I do one more thing, after I make the most perfect episode outline, for example. My sensory tolerance drops, so normal sounds feel sharper, harder to hear. Screens feel more draining than they normally do. Small interruptions feel like disproportionately irritating. So my nervous system is basically asking for less input. And something that I struggle with all the time is being interrupted. It is literally so difficult for me. And being a mom means that I'm constantly being interrupted whenever I'm trying to work on things that I care about. And I will say that I handle it really well. I always go to my daughter with a smile on my face, always being kind to her, even if I'm dysregulated. But it really is so difficult, and living life like that every single day is exhausting. Whenever I am working on something that I care about and all of a sudden she wakes up from her nap and I'm not finished, it can be so irritating. And like I said, sometimes highly sensitive people, we overreact to things that seem small. My emotional absorption increases, so I take on other people's moods without realizing them. I feel emotionally heavy after interactions, even neutral ones, and I feel responsible for others' feelings. This happens a lot of the time before I notice that I'm exhausted. Creativity feels like pressure instead of nourishing, so I have this need to create, but it feels urgent. rather than flowing. So ideas feel crowded in my mind and I feel behind on expressing myself. I start to feel like if I don't say this or if I don't write this down, then I'm never going to get it out and I'm never going to make a good podcast episode or anything like that. This is a sign that my inner world is asking me for release and I actually need to stop trying to create. I start to withdraw emotionally, so I start being distant. Even if I'm present in the moment, I go quiet, I feel misunderstood, but I can't bring myself to explain. Withdrawal is often a sign that my nervous system is trying to protect itself, even if I'm not aware that it's happening. The next one is my body gives subtle signs. My body always knows before I do, so I get a really tight chest or my throat starts hurting. I have a hard time breathing. I feel restlessness, but I'm also exhausted at the same time. The next one is joy starts to feel fragile. So I brace for my joy to disappear. I feel guilty for feeling good. I dull positive emotions so that I can avoid the eventual crash of those emotions. So if you relate to any of those, then you probably are a highly sensitive person. I wish I put this part at the beginning of the episode, but I did not realize I had it written down. I keep on feeling this pull to say more and express more, but I am going to end this week's episode here. So for this week's journal prompt, I want you to write down all the sensory stimuli that you are currently receiving. So your body, your emotions, your thoughts, your mood, lighting in the room, noises that you hear, the fabric of your clothes, just anything that you notice. This will help you connect deeper with yourself and better understand your sensory needs. I really hope you enjoyed this week's episode. If you could, please leave me a 5-star review on Spotify. Share my podcast with anyone that you think it would help or with anyone that you would like to understand your brain a little bit better. Thank you so much for listening. I'll see you next Sunday.